Morning. Looks like we cleared out the room a little bit, so that's good. We're probably down to airports instead of a little less operators. All right, so Ray asked me to do this a few weeks ago, and it was actually an opportune time to do this because we're actually overhauling our ground transportation at both Ronald Reagan National Airport and Washington Dulles Airport. So some of the things, I'll talk mostly about IAD right now, but our curb is actually into 3 levels. The top level is departures level. It serves the public and commercial drop-offs only. And then tiered down, the next level down is your arrivals level. It serves public pickup. And commercial vehicles are actually prohibited from that level unless you actually have a permit. We also have a bus service that transports, that we operate, that transports passengers between the airport and the closest metro stop, which is about 7 miles away. It's about a 15-minute trip. The commercial level, which is the next lower level down, tiered down, serves commercial pickup and drop-off, but you're only accessible through a permit or a contract in that level, with the exception of transit buses, which we don't have neither with. We have just kind of an agreement with them. And outside of that commercial curb is the terminal parking lot, the lower level. That serves our hourly public parking, obviously, and our commercial pickups for those that don't have permits or contracts with us. This is a little fuzzy picture, but this is what our commercial curb looks like. On the first curb, which is the furthest to the bottom, we have taxi cabs on the east and west side. So that's on our first curb directly out of our doors. It says Super Shuttle, but we actually have 2 shared band services right in the middle. Where you see there's elevator cores. One of the reasons why that middle section is kind of difficult to use because those elevator cords actually are stairwells that are sitting right on our curb and block the view linear on that first curb. Then on the second curb on the far east and west, we have hotel and motel. Inside of that, in the bluish color, are parking shuttles, and inside of that in the very center is rental cars. And actually another piece that's right in between, right in the middle of rental cars are transit buses, which we have that come every 30 minutes or so. So the considerations that we use for curb allocations, first and foremost is customer service. Looking at, is the service a premium service? So ideally a taxi service or a limo service. We want to put our premium services the closest to the terminal as possible. Passenger demand, how many passengers are demanding from that mode, and accommodating waiting area. This means some of our curb areas actually aren't covered. The first curb, there's sections of it that aren't covered. So if the passenger actually has to wait outside for a period of time, we don't want them waiting out, without any cover. So that might determine where we put them. Vehicle size and line of sight. Ideally, since the airport operates the parking operation, ideally that's that's a premium service kind of that you want to promote, because that's where most of the airports get the majority of their money. However, we felt that we can't put those parking shuttles on our first curb because they would block the line of sight of the second curb. So depending on how your curbs are set up, if you have your parking shuttles running up on your first curb and you're coming out the doors, you obviously can't see what your options are on the second curb. Also, since our taxis are on our first curb, mixing a large moving vehicle and many quick moving vehicles actually impedes the flow of traffic. Dwell, limitations on space. We'd have to look at how long the vehicles are sitting on the curb to see is that holding up certain throughput of those various curbs. Safety, obviously, also an interest. We have 3 crosswalks that come from the main terminal that go across curb 1 and then across curb 2 into the hourly parking lot. So depending on the vehicle mix on those curbs and pedestrians, obviously, once again, if we had buses on the first curb, that would be ideal because then you would think it would take that many more vehicles off of our crosswalks. but because of the customer service issue and line of sight, we can't put those on the first curb. So they automatically go out to the third curb, or the second curb, sorry. And then finally, agreements and branding. If you're familiar with Washington Dulles, we have Washington Flyer taxi operation and the Washington Flyer family, actually, that our shared van operates under as well. So we have concession agreements and branding that focus on, there's a value that we want to provide for those concession agreements. So it's something else that we think of if we have, whether we have a brand or a concession agreement, we want to provide them with the best opportunity. All right. Current IAD curb issues. Well, with the emergence of the TNCs, our demand for our curbs and roadways and staging areas have gotten congested, as many other airports have. Some operators, our current regulations are rather outdated. Some of our operators are regulated, yet some are not. For instance, our limos. We charge absolutely nothing for limos that come and drop off or pick up at the airport today. However, shared van, other concession agreements, hotel motels, we are charging for that. Some are obviously regulated, some aren't, so we tell some where they have to go and some not. So that's one of the issues that we have to fix. Finally, the airport is self-sustaining, and it's dependent upon all users, so anybody who comes to the airport to support the expenses of the airport. So we identified that we need to make a change there and make sure that everybody's paying. So our goals were to enhance customer service and satisfaction by making a broad range of ground transportation options available to the airport. What's that mean? That means that anybody who wants to come to the airport, TNCs, limos, sedans, taxis, would all be afforded the opportunity to do that. We want to provide them equitable access, so we don't want to single anyone out. Everybody has some reasonable access to the curb, whether it's a lower level, upper level, middle level, providing them the most equitable access. We felt that we need to introduce a staging lot. Today we don't have a staging lot. Our regulations actually require, before you come on airport property, so before you even cross the property line, you have to have a prearranged trip. Well, the TNCs have changed that a little bit for us, where they don't have a prearranged trip. You may have seen in some of the articles for DCA, or for IED actually, where Uber actually had blacked out the airport property at IAD, and that was part of our enforcement issues. We were enforcing these our regulations to say you can't come onto airport property, and we were citing them. Well, they blocked out the airport property, and then that required all the TNCs to sit outside the property, so you couldn't visually see them anymore. Uber did that. We didn't ask them to, they just did it. Well, now they've changed that, and now they've created a queuing system on airport. So now they're back on airport property, and it's actually worse because now they've set up a queue so where the first one that crosses over the property line is the first one next in line. So what they do is, just like a taxi, they come in, they sit, and they don't want to leave, or they get thrown out of that queue. So what has it done? It's increased more congestion for us. So we decided that we want to introduce a remote staging lot, so where it will be free to park, because we actually have excess space at the airport. So at Dulles, we're going to probably start it out as free to park, and where they can be pinged on site. Maybe other commercial operators could sit there as well, and wait. We'll probably tie it to some facilities like a gas station or convenience location or something like that. At DCA, because their space is constricted, they'll probably charge for dwell fees after a certain amount of time, so they'll probably only have maybe 20 or 30 minutes provided in there. We're going to try and use our current technology, so everyone's going to use AVI, but we are considering the geofence technology for TNCs. It's really the only way that we can manage them at this point. There's so many of them. It would just be very difficult probably to get AVI tags on them. And then finally, we'll be assessing access and dwell fees. And I say access fee because it's not pickup or drop off, it is access, so it covers both. We're really looking at charging, whether you're picking up or dropping off, it's an access fee for coming to our curb. the final piece is pricing. Some airports, look at cost recovery or revenue generating. We are revenue generating, so we won't be focusing on the cost recovery. We'll be focusing on that revenue generating to really cover the expenses of the airport as a whole, not just part of the curb. Trip fees, percentage of gross, flat fees, these are all different forms of fees that the airports charge. We are headed towards trip fees on most of these. We're really breaking away from the percentage of gross receipts just because it's audit challenged. And flat fees are typically just initial fees that cover for an entire year, but looking at trip fees, if we're going to manage it, we're going to manage it all the way through the year. Pick up, drop off, dwell, those are all options of fees that we'll charge as well, in addition to probably a small administrative fee that will actually be cost recovery. But most of our will be pickup and drop-off fee, which will be in a combination of an access fee. And then there'll be some certain areas that will charge a dwell, where others will probably just enforce. Then the basis of our pricing strategies is proximity. So proximity to the terminal. There's an option there that, if you're on curb 2, you might pay, something cheaper. If you're on curb 1, you might pay a premium fee. Or the service type. Taxis might be all charged in one lump sum, limos may in another, vans in another, and coaches in another. Vehicle size and passenger capacity. This is one that we'll probably be going with. And it's just really, with a discount probably to the higher volume passengers or modes of like buses and shared vans. And then you can also add on certain amenities. So if you start off at vehicle size and passenger capacity, then you could add on certain amenities, like if they're on curb 1, or if they're allowed access to the departures level, or the arrivals level, or for the TNC purposes, since they're not using our AVI system, maybe there's an additional charge because we have to use this geofence thing. So that's where the combination comes in. And that's essentially it. That's where we're headed. Thanks.
Bill, thank you.